Hello, everybody. And this is not your normal host, Jeff Farrell. This is Andrew Tansey. Jeff decided to take an early season bye week already. I think he's already burned out. We haven't even made it to week 4 yet. So I'll be running the show today and filling in today. We have what some would say is an upgrade. Jeff's brother, my cousin, Dave Farrell, making his third appearance on the show over the past couple of years. Dave, what's going on? Good to have you. How was week 3 for you?
Week 3 was great for me. Glad to be back on the show. Thank you guys for having me. Shout out to Jeff for not being here today. But week 3 was a lot of fun. We've seen a lot of great games to start this season off. You know, the witching hours have been a blast. Lots of up and down roller coaster games, but excited to get into week 4. I'm expecting a lot more of the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone who doesn't have NFL Red Zone right now, you got to find a way to get it because it just makes your Sundays 10 times more exciting when you're bouncing between all these games and all these come behind victories all within 10 minutes. So yeah, definitely exciting. It was another wild and awesome week in the NFL. We now have underdogs and unders on the totals are now both hitting and covering at a 61% clip through the first 3 weeks. So definitely something to keep in mind moving forward. I don't know if we can expect some regression for the overs and the favorites, or if we're going to see some, the books making adjustments on there. But definitely an interesting start to the season for sure in that aspect. Before we dive into week 4, let's take a quick look back at week 3 and see how we did. Our favorite bets of the week, I picked up a fairly easy win with the Bengals covering -4.5 versus the Jets. It wasn't an absolutely dominating win like I wanted to see, but they were in control for pretty much most of that game. As expected, the Jets didn't really have the prowess on the defensive line to take advantage of that weak Bengals offensive line. Jeff also got an easy win on that sad excuse of what we are calling a football game on Sunday night with the under 45. So that brings us both to 2-1 on the season. So we are 4-2 overall to start the year on our favorite bets of the week. Long shots of the week, I took a loss on Davante Adams, same game parlay, 100 yards, touchdown, and a Raiders win. I did not anticipate Mac Hollins becoming the wide receiver 1 for the Las Vegas Raiders. So that'll drop me to 1-2 on my long shots. Jeff comes through with his first long shot win of the season on Kyle Pitts to get 60 yards and a Falcons win over the Seahawks. So I am now 1-2. Jeff is 1-1 in long shots. Debate of the week. We can skip over that. Jeff's moves to 2-0. The Raiders suck. No big deal. I'll bounce back. Prop sheet is now stays at 500 actually. So 24-24 overall. We had a 9-9 week. Some disappointing losses in there. I really loved Justin Jefferson yards, and he was just non-existent. Adam Thielen was the favorite target for Kirk Cousins in a game that the Vikings offense, they put up 27 points, but it didn't seem like they were really lighting it up like I expected to on that weak line secondary. Devontae Adams was another one I really liked, and he pooped the bed as well. We had Tyree and Jalen Waddle. Waddle hit the over. Tyreek did not. The Dolphins offense was barely on the field for that game, so that was a tough one. And Steph Diggs cramps up at a crucial point of the game when he basically needed one more catch to hit his over. So some tough losses, but no excuses. Every loss counts the same. On to a new week. And finally, the Chalk Donkey Parlay gets a win at plus money with the Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals taking care of business. So, speaking of the Rams, a perfect segue into our heroes and zeros of the week, which I will kick it to my zero of the week to start, and it's Cam Akers. This guy, look, I get he had the great comeback from the Achilles injury, but the guy averages 2 or 3 yards per carry every game. And finally, this guy is setting like a career high, averaging over 5 yards per carry. And he screws it up by fumbling at the 1 yard line, which would have been going into the end zone to cash the Rams team total over 26.5 that I loved so much. And I also had to sweat a backdoor cover from the Cardinals because of it. Luckily, the Rams did not allow the Cardinals to score there in the final minute. But Cam Akers, my zero of the week. Hold on to the ball, man. You're finally running the ball well. Just hold on to it. Dave, what do you got for your zero of the week?
Just one thing on Cam Akers. If you remember in the playoff game last year against the Bucks, the Rams had that game absolutely in hand going into the half, and Cam Akers did the exact same thing, fumbled the ball on the goal line, brought the Bucks all the way back into that game, and he's still doing the same thing this year. Just unbelievable to watch.
And they keep giving him the ball. I don't get it. Why? What has this guy done in the that you've seen? Like Darrell Henderson is clearly the better back. He seems to like he's averaging over 4 yards per carry. I think 4.5 to 5 yards per carry. Cam Akers just looks like he's running in wet cement, and now he can't hold onto the ball. So
yeah, I don't know what McVay is seeing in him there. So my zero of the week, I'm going to go over towards the Pittsburgh Steelers and give it to Mike Tomlin. I mean, speaking of what is this guy seeing in another guy, what is Mike Tomlin seeing out of Mitch Trubisky that he deserves to still be the starter of this Steelers offense? Through 3 games, he's averaging 182 pass yards, has two pass yards per game, 2 total touchdowns. They're going 3 and out on 32% of their drives this year. Just an incredible number of awful offense, only averaging about 24 yards per drive. So when he's asked what they're going to do about the quarterback situation, if he's thinking about making a switch to Kenny Pickett, Mike Tomlin says, "I'm not in that mindset. The answer is definitely no." I have no idea what this guy's looking at. I'm not sure if Kenny Pickett is going to be the answer. Probably not. But one thing we know for sure is Mitch Trubisky is not. He's not going to take you to the playoffs. You still have an elite defense back there, especially when J.J. Watt, he hopefully makes it back soon. So Mike Tomlin, my big zero of the week.
yeah, you have some people blaming Trubisky. You have some Steelers fans will blame Matt Canada. I think it's a combination of both. If you're ever going to make a change, if Trubisky comes out and struggles against the Jets this week, I think it'd be a good move to get Pickett in there at halftime, maybe against a weaker Jets team, and maybe build some confidence in his first NFL action. So yeah, rough week for the Steelers. If you got on the under 40.5 with Jeff and I when we gave it out on Twitter early last week, you suffered a brutal beat there at the end of the game with the lateral play. I know a lot of people got screwed in all kinds of different ways on that play. It was probably the first really bad beat of the NFL season. So you got to take that one on the chin and move on for sure. Heroes of the week. My hero of the week, Mike McDaniel. And we got to give this guy some credit. The first 3 weeks of the season, this guy's beaten 2 Hall of Fame coaches, maybe the best coach of all time, Bill Belichick, beats John Harbaugh, and now he beats the Super Bowl favorites in the Buffalo Bills. So Mike McDaniel off to a hot start in his coaching career. Has the Dolphins off to a great start. See if they can continue it this week on Thursday night. But Mike McDaniel, my hero of the week. I had a lot of money invested in the Dolphins in that game. I really liked them in that spot and in that matchup. So big week for Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my hero of the week, I'm going to go to the other undefeated team left in the NFL and stick it with Jalen Hurts. I mean, this guy has been unbelievable to start the year, putting aside the Eagles' second half struggles that they've had through the past 2 weeks. But through 3 weeks this year, Jalen Hurts has accounted for 1,083 total yards, which is trailing only behind Josh Allen. He has a 7-to-1 total touchdown to interception ratio. You see him making those plays with his legs. We know he had that ability from watching him last year, but you're seeing him a lot more comfortable in the pocket, getting a lot of his receivers involved. We saw big games out of A.J. Brown week 1, and now he turns it around and does the same thing with Devontae Smith. So it looks like he's taken a huge step forward, and you're seeing that in the betting markets as well. He is shooting up those MVP odds boards. I think before the draft, I grabbed a piece of it at 50-1. He's now up to 6-1, depending where you're looking, trailing only behind Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson right now. So Jalen Hurts playing like an MVP out there. He is my hero of the week.
Yeah, Hurts climbing up the MVP board. The Eagles are now the favorites to win the NFC. So, yeah, everything's looking good for the Eagles right now. I think the only gripe you can have with the team overall is the lack of production in the second halves over the last few weeks. But overall, they're looking like one of the most complete teams in the NFL, and everything's clicking right now. So, see if they can continue it this week against Jacksonville. All right, ready to dive into week 4?
Let's do it.
All right, Thursday night. The aforementioned Miami Dolphins now heading to Cincinnati. Cincinnati Bengals are 3.5-point favorites. Total is at 46.5. Tua obviously nursing They're calling it a back injury. I'm not sure if they're referring to the back of his head or what. And an ankle injury. Xavier Howard also questionable. Teron Armstead questionable. Cincinnati, La'el Collins is questionable on the offensive line. Dolphins obviously coming off that thrilling victory against the Buffalo Bills, and Bengals coming off a much needed win against the Jets. Everyone I've heard this week is on the is on the Cincinnati Bengals. Sorry, Dave. What do you got here?
Yeah, I think so far I've had the opposite read of the market on this game. When this opened at, I believe it was 1.5, Bengals minus 1.5, I wanted to jump on the Dolphins. I wasn't of the belief that the Bengals proved enough in that Jets win to warrant being a favorite against that undefeated Dolphins team. Luckily, I kind of was talked out of it, and glad to hear it, because so far, based on the way the market's moved, we're now up to a Bengals minus 3.5. We've seen some fours in some spots. And at this point, I want to take the Dolphins, but I just can't do it with the concerns about Tua's health. Like you said, his back, the back of his head, whatever you want to call it. There's something wrong with Tua right now, and I simply I can't bet on the Dolphins in that situation. So the only thing I'm holding out hope for is if Tua ends up sitting in this game. Sitting behind him on the bench is none other than Teddy Bridgewater, who we love to bet. He is 42-20-1 in his career against the spread, and he's done it with multiple teams. It's not just an early season or early career piece of his game there. He was covering these spreads. He's done it with the Saints, the Broncos, the Vikings, the Panthers. Wherever you put this guy, for whatever reason, he can cover the spread. So if we get Teddy Bridgewater in this game and you can give me a 6 or higher, I'm all over that. But for right now, I think if you're sitting with a nice Bengals under 3 ticket, you're looking good. Otherwise, it's a stay away from me.
Yeah, that's a good call. So I think if you want the Bengals, you haven't bet them yet. I think you grab them now because I don't see it moving back under 3. Maybe probably won't even get back to a flat 3. If you want to bet the Dolphins, I think you would wait and obviously see if 2 is in. If not, you'll get a better number with Bridgewater. And obviously the reason everyone's on the Bengals here is because of it's the spot. So you have the Miami defense, you just played 90 plays, was on the field for 42 minutes of the game against the Bills in that Miami humidity, obviously. So it's a quick turnaround traveling on a Thursday night. So yes, it's a Bengals spot for sure. But how far do we take this spot? It's already moved 2 points. If we start to get those 4s and 4.5s, I think there at some point you have to start looking at the Miami Dolphins here. I know Tua is banged up, but if he's out there, I'm operating under the assumption he doesn't have an elbow injury or a shoulder injury or anything like that. Maybe only has half a brain after the injury he suffered. I'm not sure, but I think he'll be okay if he's out there. And this defense, people are looking at the box score of that game and saying, "Oh, the Bills outplayed the Dolphins by a mile," because you're looking at the total yards. Well, like I said, the Bills ran 90 plays. They obviously racked up a ton of yards in those 90 plays, 5.5 yards per play. That's right around league average. So for the Miami defense to hold up as well as they did and allow 19 points, I think the Bills ended with. I
Yeah.
think that Miami really did a great job of grinding out that win. The offense capitalized when they needed to. So I think it was an overall really impressive win. I bet the over in this game because I do think there is something to that Miami defense being tired. Um, the Bengals are obviously a team that if you give Joe Burrow enough time, he's going to be able to take advantage of a tired defense or a burnout secondary. We'll see how that Miami pass rush looks in the second half. Maybe that's when it starts to catch up to them. And I think this Miami offense, we've seen how explosive they can be with their weapons on the outside. I don't think the Cincinnati defense is anything too special. I consider them average, maybe a little bit above average. So I do expect some points here. I know primetime unders have definitely been a popular play so far, and they've been hitting, but I grabbed it at 47.5, so I got a bad number. It's down to 46.5. Maybe I grabbed it a little bit early before more information came out on the Tua stuff, but I don't see any issue if Tua is in this being like a 27-24 type of game or something like that, and getting into the low 50s. So that's where I'm at on this game. And you know, this Bengals secondary, we just saw allow 7.6 yards per pass to Cooper Rush 2 weeks ago. So you throw 2 in this spot now with Waddle and Tyree Kill. I think there's a chance for an over here. Props in this game. You got anything?
Nothing for me on this side. It's tough with the, obviously the Tua injury. You don't know what he's going to look like if he's out there and they want to push him to play. They do have some pretty easy spots on the schedule coming up. So are they going to push him out there, try and get this one more win and then let him coast a little bit in the next couple of weeks? Or is this going to be a conservative game plan to just have him manage even if they drop a game? Their upcoming schedule: Jets, Vikings, Steelers, Lions, Bears, Browns, Texans. A lot of winnable games in there. So I don't think you want to push Tua too hard and have him with a bad injury that keeps him out a couple weeks. So because of that, I'm off this game from a prop standpoint. Just one thing I want to watch though is the Tyreek Hill Eli Apple matchup. You saw Tyreek talking in the media about it. He's a little bit bitter about their playoff game, or was it playoff game last year between the Chiefs and the Bengals when he got stopped before the half on a touchdown. So I know those two are going to be jaw, and he was lying about 70.5, but I can't take that number not knowing what Tua's health situation is.
Yeah, I think if two is in, I am going to play the Tyreek Hill over. I think he's going to absolutely torch Eli Apple on the outside. I don't think he can stick with him. Tyreek obviously didn't have a monster game last week, but that was because of the lack of plays on offense. And I think he's primed for a big game here if he's going to be matched up with Eli Apple for most of the game. And the Dolphins can't run the ball, so this is a passing offense. So I have no problem, especially in a game where I like the over. I have no problem going to Tyreek Hill in the low 70s. All right. Anything else?
Nothing else.
All right. Brew your cup of coffee. Get on your couch early, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We're heading it over to London. The Minnesota Vikings, 3-point favorites over the New Orleans Saints, total at 43.5. Vikings coming off the come from behind win over the Detroit Lions in a game with which they probably didn't deserve the win. The Lions really kind of collapsed there, made a couple bad coaching decisions, and the Saints suffered another ugly loss at the hands of the Carolina Panthers. Minnesota injuries, Dalvin Cook, shoulder injury, 50-50. It seems like if he's going to play, Zadarius Smith also questionable. New Orleans, Jameis obviously nursing the fractured back. Marcus Davenport questionable. Marcus May, Taysom Hill, Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, all questionable for the New Orleans Saints. Dave, what do you got here in London?
Yeah, I haven't bet it yet, but I'm gonna end up on the Vikings here. The spot just seems to make sense for them. You named all the injuries on the Saints side of the ball. All of their skill position players are essentially injured. We've seen it with the quarterbacks this year. Jameis not looking like himself, Herbert not looking like himself. When they have these back rib type injuries, it's really affecting their play out there. So when you don't have, of course, Slant Boy couldn't make it 4 weeks without popping up on an injury report. No surprise there. But even the run game, they have not been able to get Alvin Kamara going whatsoever. And I don't see them having any more success against this Vikings team. I'm not as concerned about the Dalvin Cook injury. He's had this same shoulder injury, I think, 4 different times in his career. Kevin O'Connell said he's prepared to play through it. But even if not, Alexander Madison is a fully capable running back
So the
right
same
behind
player.
him.
They
Yeah,
look
they're
the same. They play. They're the same
yes,
player. Yeah.
easily mistakable. So I have no concerns about the run game. And we've seen Justin Jefferson, if he gets out of his cage that Darius Slay put him in, I think he's in for a big game. But we know this offense has much more explosive potential than the Saints. So for me, this is a Vikings or pass. I haven't taken it yet, but I'm most likely going to end up on that side.
Yeah, I bet the Vikings money line already. We all know I'm the resident Minnesota Vikings fan in here for this season. And we've seen a couple sides of this team. They look great in week one in the win over Green Bay, obviously terrible on the Monday night game against Philly. And then last week, the Lions had their way a majority of the time on the Vikings defense, and we saw the Vikings rally late for the come from behind victory. So it's been a hot and cold season for the Vikings so far. It's really like I have faith in this offense. I have faith in Kevin O'Connell and the talent on this offense. It's the defense that's a major concern for me moving forward with this team. But this Saints offense is just broken. Jameis is absolutely broken right now. Like you said, they can't get the run game going with Kamara. They continue to need Jameis to throw the ball 40 plus times. And that's exactly what you didn't want to see from this Saints team coming into this season. So I just think you need this Saints defense to just play out of their mind, especially in this matchup to cover a small 3-point spread here. I don't think they can hang with the Vikings. The Vikings could get 21 to 24 points, and I think cover this spread here. And the Vikings, to me, are just the better team right now, despite those ups and downs. So field goal or better, neutral field. I'm getting the better team. Just give me the Vikings all the way here. Any props here for you?
The only prop I would look at, there's nothing on the Saints side. All the injuries, they haven't been able to get a consistent run or passing game going, really. So there's nothing you can look at there with the Jameis injury. The only thing I would think about on the Vikings side, if Dalvin Cook does end up missing this game, Alexander Madison slides right into that spot. Last year when Cook missed time, Madison, I think it was over 4 games, he averaged 21 and a half carries and put up 89 yards per game. So if we get a nice line on Alexander Madison sliding in there as the backup, that's a spot I'm going to look at. I don't think that prop is out yet.
All right. I have Chris Olave. We talked about him last week on the podcast as a long shot SGP candidate or a longest reception over, which if you took that, that did hit. He came through last week putting up 147 yards on 13 targets. And I said last week I wasn't really looking at him from a straight up prop perspective, taking his over yards. But with Michael Thomas banged up, Jarvis Landry banged up, Olave saw 13 targets last week. I think it's going to be another game. The Saints are going to need to pass the ball to keep up with the Vikings. So I don't expect a massive overreaction. I'm pretty sure Olave's been lined in the 40s, 147 yards last week. I think you could see something in the 50s. I'm fine taking that, especially if he's going to be seeing double-digit targets. He's an explosive player, getting targets down the field. So realistically, you connect on one target down the field, and you could hit the over here. So I'll be looking at where his props open up. All right. Heading to our hometown Philadelphia Eagles, 2 division leaders squaring off with the Jags visiting Philadelphia after a dominating win over the LA Chargers, and the Eagles also a dominating win over former quarterback Carson Wentz and the Washington Football Commanders. Doug Peterson making his return to Philadelphia after being fired, 2 years after winning the Super Bowl. So to me, I kind of wish I grabbed this line at the 7 when it opened up. I think this Jags team is for real, and they look great on both sides of the ball. They didn't just squeak by with these last 2 wins. They absolutely dominated the Colts, shut them out. And yes, the Chargers were banged up last week. I don't think Herbert being healthy is going to make up a 28-point deficit in that game. They could easily be 3-0, barring a few crucial mistakes against Washington. The Eagles' second halves, like I mentioned earlier, definitely a bit concerning. It's kind of been overshadowed because it hasn't cost them yet. 0 points in the second half in each of the last 2 games. In week 1, they almost blew a 17-point late third quarter lead. So you can chalk that up to them taking their foot off the gas pedal, or it's the other teams are making halftime adjustments and the Eagles can't adjust to that. So, like I said, we haven't seen it costing them because the defense is kind of the defense has held stout in the second half of the past couple of weeks, but I think this Jags defense has enough young, athleticism type players that can at least limit Hurts' rushing ability, where he's not rushing for 15 carries for 70 plus yards like we saw in the first couple of weeks. So I just think 7 points right here. You're not getting a massive overreaction with the Jaguars because I think the Eagles are one of the most popular teams in the league to bet right now. So I like the Jags here. I would still lean them at 6.5, but I really want that 7 to pop back up here. If not, maybe you wait for an Eagles to jump out to a first half lead and you can get the Jaguars at 10 points heading into the second half or something like that.
I hear what you're saying on all those points. I think I just fall on the other side of it. For me, if you're getting the Eagles at under a touchdown, that's the bet I made on this game. And the question that you asked, are we overreacting a little bit to these Jags wins? I know the Eagles are clearly the hottest team in the market right now, but I think it's all deservedly so. You saw them put up 38 points against the Lions. You've seen what the offense can do. They shut down a what was supposed to be, in your eyes, such a prolific Vikings offense. They shut down Dalvin Cook, absolutely clamped Justin Jefferson. And then the defensive line just attacks Carson Wentz all over the field the entire game. If you're putting that same sort of pressure on Trevor Lawrence, trying to lock down Christian Kirk, who's been incredibly consistent, what is this Jaguars team going to look like? Yes, they did shut out the Colts, but it's pretty clear without Michael Pittman, Matt Ryan is just a lost puppy back there, has no idea what to do. They actually got down in the red zone multiple times, had multiple 4-play drives down in the red zone, and they just couldn't convert anything.
Well, that's Colts football for you.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I think there's a slight overreaction to this Jaguars team, and then beating up, they absolutely did smack the Chargers, but it's not just the Herbert side of it. If they have Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa, Rashawn Slater, they're losing guys left and right. No J.C. Jackson out there. If you're seeing a healthier team, what does that game really look like? So for me, this is an Eagles team that I still want to bet on it under a touchdown in a home spot. Give me the Eagles -6.5 here.
See, I think you're underplaying the Jags wins too much. You're not giving enough credit. A shutout in the NFL is so hard to do now, regardless of injuries, regardless of anything. And it's not like they beat the Chargers by 3 points and it's like, okay, yeah, you have a healthy Herbert, healthy JC Jacks, you can make a case. They dominated that game from start to finish. So I think you're underplaying it a little bit too much. Maybe you think I'm overplaying it, but I think this is a Jag spot if you're going to bet this game. But I guess I can
Yeah,
see why you like the Eagles, but
it's no doubt they've had some impressive games so far. And I think, if you look at their division market, they're still not the odds-on
I
favorite
know,
to
I
win that
saw that,
division
yeah.
for whatever reason. I think maybe it's an element of an overrating on the Jaguars in this matchup, but I think the Eagles have just dominated every facet of the game. And you can talk about their second half struggles, but I could easily make the argument they're just taking their foot off the gas. Why even need to push the ball down the field if Carson Wentz is getting sacked every other play? Why need to push the ball down the field if Kirk Cousins should have thrown 6 interceptions in that game? I mean, I like the Eagles in this spot. They haven't shown me anything that makes me want to bet against them. I just think they're a class above the Jaguars as much as this team has been fun to watch. We love Doug Peterson, obviously. That's going to be a fun little reunion, but I think the Eagles are just a class above. So if you're giving me them under a touchdown, I'm taking that.
All right. Well, if anyone listened to our off-season podcast, you're feeling pretty good with a Jag 7-1 division ticket right now. Off to a pretty good start. Obviously, a lot of the way to go. But any props here for you?
No props for me here.
Yeah, I got nothing in this game either. All right. The Cleveland Browns heading to Atlanta as a 1.5 point favorites. Total is 49.5. Browns with the extra rest coming off the Thursday night win versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Falcons picking up their first win of the season in Seattle. This spread dropped a little bit after the Myles Garrett news earlier in the week, and I bought the dip on the Browns. I took their money line at -120 here. Injuries, Denzel Ward questionable. The Browns do have a few offensive linemen questionable. Clowney and Myles Garrett both questionable. Myles Garrett sounds like he's going to try to play, which is pretty remarkable. I don't know if it's actually going to end up happening, but this game's simple for me. I think it's a game where the Browns are just going to dominate the line of scrimmage, feed Nick Chubb en route to a victory. Is 341 yards through 3 games. The Falcons ranked 28th in adjusted line yards, dead last in stuff rate, and they really only have one good player on the front seven and Grady Jarrett. So when you only have one guy, it's pretty easy to run away from them. I don't think it's going to be a runaway game. The Falcons have shown they aren't a team that's going to roll over, and their offense does definitely have some juice here. But at basically a pick 'em here, if you want to lay the 1.5 points, I think the Browns are just an overall better team that's going to be able to dominate in the trenches here. So give me the Browns here. Dave, what do you got?
I'm with you on this one. I also took the Browns money line, probably a tad higher than where you got them, but for the same exact reasons, I think they're going to be able to control the clock, control this game on the ground with Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. And the Falcons have been a fun team to watch as well. They've covered in all 3 games this season. Mariota's been fun out there, but I really think the Browns run game is far superior to what the Falcons have been able to do on offense, even with Cordero Patterson playing out of his mind right now. So I'm also on the Browns money line.
Yeah, obviously monitor the injuries on the Browns offensive line. That's obviously a big deal if they're missing 3 offensive linemen, but I'll be targeting Nick Chubb rush yards in this game. I think, honestly, if you give me anything under 100 yards, I'm going to have to take it here. That's just with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, especially in a matchup like this, the recipe to win games is just give Nick Chubb 20 to 25 carries behind an offensive line that's going to overpower the Falcons here. Let Jacoby Brissett manage the game and, get a few stops on defense. So Nick Chubb rush yards. Do you like anything else here from a prop standpoint?
I have Chubb rush yards as well. Like you said, anything under the triple digits I'm in on. I did also take the under on this game. Opened at 46.5, got bet up to 49.5, 50, which is a little bit scary because both of these teams are 3-0 in their games to the over. I think just this one is just getting a little bit out of hand. This is 7.5 points higher total than any of the Browns games have closed at, and 3.5 points higher on any of the Falcons game have closed at. So I think, as we already said, that the unders this season are hitting at over a 60% rate. I think we're going to see a little bit of aggression between these two teams, especially if the Browns can control the clock by running the ball the whole game. So I have the under 49.5 in addition to those Chubb yards.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well. The only thing that scares me is the Falcons have the type of offense where in the fourth quarter, if a defense, say the Browns do jump out to a decent sized lead, the Falcons have the type of offense that is capable of putting up points if the defense loosens up even a little bit. So they could score 14 points in the last 6 minutes of the game if you give them a couple possessions or something like that. And they've shown they can, both of these offenses, you wouldn't expect it. They've scored I think 25 plus points or somewhere around there in all their games. So I would definitely lean to the under, but I didn't pull the trigger on it. All right.
Yeah.
Anything left on this game?
Nah, it's a little bit of a scary spot for the under, just seeing as what these teams have done. And the Falcons are not quitting in this game. I just think if we're going to be eating the clock a lot on both sides throughout the run game, there's enough variance based on where the number's at. I like the under in it, but nothing else on this one.
Yeah, I have a Falcons under 4.5 wins for the season. They've definitely shown a little bit more fight than I expected, but obviously still only the one win so far. So hopefully the Browns can come through here. All right. NFC East divisional matchup with the Dallas Cowboys coming off their second straight win with no Dak Prescott on a Monday night versus the Giants. The Commanders coming off that ugly loss, like we said, in which Carson Wentz was sacked 9 times. Dak Prescott still going to miss this game. Michael Gallup questionable, maybe back this week. Dalton Schultz questionable after missing last week, and Connor McGovern also questionable. Dave, are we taking the Dallas Cowboys as 3.5 point favorites here over the Commanders?
I don't have a bet on this game yet. I really hate it. I really, really want to fade Cooper Rush. He has looked great so far. I think he's exceeding expectations, but I've started to hear the chatter in my ear about, is Cooper Rush going to be in a QB competition with Dak Prescott when he gets back? As soon as I hear something like that, yeah, Cooper Rush is a fine quarterback. That's an immediate sell spot for me. The unfortunate thing is that they're playing the Washington Commanders, who might just be a bottom 5 team in the league. Unfortunately, you saw what the Eagles defensive line just did to them, and now they're going to go against Micah Parsons, arguably the best defensive player in the game right now, and DeMarcus Lawrence, who just sacked Daniel Jones 3 times. So it's a bad spot for them to be in. I really wish that the Cowboys were playing basically anyone else. So this is a pass for me. I can't bet the Commanders unless this gets up another point or two. But at a -3, I'm just out on this team.
So I took the Cowboys I took their money line. I laid some juice. I think I got -155 or something. I hear you with the Cooper Rush being better than Dak, but all I need from Cooper Rush is what he's done: manage the game and don't turn the ball over. I think he's really done a great job. Now, obviously, with Cooper Rush instead of Dak, you don't have as high of a ceiling from an offensive standpoint, but he's done a great job filling in. And like you said, this is just another pass rush that could eat this Washington offensive line alive. And it's just, even when the line protects, you have the same old Carson Wentz back there holding the ball. So why would I expect anything different? The dude's been doing his entire career. He was sacked 9 times last week, 5 the week before that. The Cowboys faced 2 mediocre offensive lines the past 2 weeks, and we saw what they did. They got 5 sacks and they got 6 sacks. So the defense as a whole has really stepped up in Dak's absence, and that's kind of what this bet is on. I mean, Cooper Rush has shown enough to where I think the Cowboys can score probably 20 plus points on this Commanders defense. And you haven't seen anything from the Commanders offense that makes you think they're going to put up a ton of points and be able to protect Wentz. So the run game is working for the Cowboys. Even with Tyron Smith, they're ranking top 10 in line yards, second best in stuff rate. And I just think this Commanders team has quit potential. They may have already quit. I think you see some body language from Terry McLaurin. These guys don't believe in Wentz any more than we do. So that organization's been a disaster for years now. And if Wentz comes out and looks just as bad here, it's only a matter of time before they turn back to Taylor Heineke on the bench. So I don't love taking the Cowboys here because I feel like you're somewhat buying them at their peak with Cooper Rush, and you're selling the Commanders probably at their low. But I honestly would probably make the Cowboys 4.5 point favorites here. I think this Commanders team is just done. And you and I have a Commanders versus Giants head-to-head win total bet. Dave, how are you feeling about that right now?
I felt better about that one. I don't know what's roping me into the Commanders. Carson Wentz, in the first two games, he showed some flashes of old Carson Wentz. He put up some nice stat lines, and then he turns around and just throws these awful interceptions. So I'm not feeling great about it, and I can't disagree with anything you said on this game. I think just wrapping my mind around, let's say Dak comes back next week. Cooper Rush filled in 3 games, 3 wins, 3 against the spread covers. Just hard to wrap my mind around. So it really makes me want to fade this team, but I just can't do it with Carson Wentz and the Commanders right now.
Wentz is only good when the team goes after he screws up. Basically, week 1 against the Jaguars, he throws the god awful 2 interceptions, and then he leads a game winning drive. Week 2, they go down 24-0 against the Lions, and then he starts rallying the offense, and they're driving up and down the field. So it's like, if the dude's only going to be good after he screws up, you're going to be playing from behind every week. So yeah, this Washington team, like you said, they could easily be a bottom 5 team in this league right now. Props: Curtis Samuel receptions. Last 2 weeks we hit this. He's pretty much the only consistent part of this offense. He has 22 receptions through 3 games. So if we get a 4.5 or a 5.5 at plus money, I'll be back on Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, right there with you. He's getting about 10 targets per game. Seems to be Wentz's favorite receiver right now. I don't know how you can go against that, no matter what the matchup is. He's been matchup proof. So I'm with you on Curtis Samuel. That was my only prop.
All right. Moving on, the Seattle Seahawks, coming off that loss to the Atlanta Falcons, now traveling to Detroit, who is 4.5-point favorites, 48.5 point over under. Lions coming off that heartbreaking loss to the Vikings. DeAndre Swift doubtful in this matchup. The Sun God questionable and not looking good to play. That's obviously another huge loss for this offense. DJ Chark questionable. Josh Reynolds questionable. So you got all these wide receivers questionable. TJ Hawkinson also questionable for the Lions. So I think it's pretty hard for me with those injuries to even consider laying 4.5 points here with the Lions, which already in and of itself would be hard for me to do. I haven't adjusted to this, notion of the Lions having a top tier offense. I still can't wrap my mind around it. But with all these guys questionable, it's tough for me to even have a play on this game. And the Seattle team is just really, really bad. So I got nothing in this game from a side or total standpoint. Dave, do you have a play here? Will you be laying 4.5 points with Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions?
I don't think you can lay the points with the Lions with Swift and probably Amon-Ra out of this game. We don't know what this offense is going to look like. They have been by far the 2 biggest producers outside of Jamal Williams on the goal line. If you take away those 2 offensive weapons, is this going to look like the Colts did in week 2, where they can't move the ball up and down the field? I'm not willing to take that risk, not at a 4.5 point spread. I wish I took the Seahawks at +6 at the open. I wanted to, and chickened out of it. So now I'm kicking myself for that one, but I would never take them. I wouldn't take the Seahawks at a 4, and I think it's just going to end up being a pass for me until we see what this Lions offense can do without their 2 best weapons.
You won't be kicking yourself that you didn't take the Seahawks. Trust me. I've been there. I've bet the Seahawks. It doesn't go well. Props. I will be all over Jamal Williams rush yards with DeAndre Swift set to miss this game. He saw 20 carries last week. If Sun God is questionable, or if he's banged up and playing, or if he's not playing, even more of the reason to run the ball here. The Seahawks run defense is the whole defense as a whole is just an absolute disaster. You can throw on them, you can run on them. So 20 carries for 87 yards last week with Swift playing but banged up, and I would expect something similar here. And if we get this in the 60s or maybe even low 70s, I'll consider taking the over here. So I would, Jamal Williams with a big workload against this defense. I am very intrigued. Anything for you here?
Yeah, I think that's a good spot. In the receiving game for the Lions, I'm going to look at what Josh Reynolds comes out lined at. He started off the season pretty slow. It's been basically all Amon-Ra in that receiving core, a little bit of DJ Chark mixed in there. But when Amon-Ra went down for a lot of last last week, Reynolds finished with 10 targets and turned that into 6 receptions and 96 yards. So if he's going to be their main option in the receiving game, I want to look at what his yards and receptions are at. Don't think we've seen lines for either one, though.
He is questionable, so something else to monitor. But yeah, if he's in there, that's a good spot. All right, moving on to the AFC South battle between two teams. I cannot seem to figure out the Titans visiting the Indianapolis Colts. Colts are 3.5-point favorites total at 42.5. This one's tough for me. I don't think either team is a good team at this. Like I said, I can't figure either of these teams out, but I couldn't pass up the 3.5 points here. This is a complete toss-up divisional game for me here. Colts are getting way too much credit here for beating the Chiefs, who pretty much gifted the Colts that game. They probably handed over, gave away 10 to 14 points in that game because of coaching decisions and special teams issues. They had the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that prolonged the game-winning drive for the Colts. So give me the 3.5 with the Titans here. I dabbled on the money line as well. I just think, forget the X's and O's standpoint. This is, like I said, a complete toss-up game. The Titans have dominated the Colts over the past couple of years. 3.5 points here. It's almost like, it feels like a fishy trap type of line that I'm getting the hook here at 3.5 with the Titans. So I jumped right into the trap and took the Titans here. Jonathan Taylor did miss practice today, by the way. He said he should be good to go. Shaquille O'Neal, Darius Shaq Leonard, questionable as he is every week. Yannick Ngakoue, DeForest Buckner, Steph Gilmore hurt his hamstring last week as well, so they are all questionable. I would expect those three to be in. Dave, give me one reason why the Colts should be laying 3.5 points here.
I do not have one. I think you said it. We have no idea what either of these teams are. One of them could end up winning this division. The other one could end up as a bottom 6 or 7 team in the league. We have no idea what they are. We saw the Titans have a bad loss to the Giants week 1. Then they started to get Derrick Henry going last week, and they beat up on the Raiders prior. And then this Colts game, the Colts didn't win that game. The Chiefs gave that away. So what is this team? Are they the team that put 0 points up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, or are they the team that beat the Chiefs? And if you told me before last week the Colts were going to put up 20 points, I would have said they lose that game 10 times out of 10 against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I really don't know what they are. Same mindset as you. If you're giving me this divisional game, 3.5, I'm going to take the Titans. It's not the most confident bet I'll be making this week, but that's really all I can do with this game.
Yeah, it's a numbers play. Sometimes you got to play the number. There's no major advantages you can point out. It's a numbers play in a divisional matchup between two teams that are fairly similar, in my opinion, and you're getting over a field goal. And yeah, like you said, that Chief, my God, we got in early. I had the Chiefs at -3 last week, and that was just freaking painful, man. It was the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, right, and the fake field goal. And there was just so many things that had to go wrong for the Chiefs in order for the Colts to pull that one out. And you look at the box score, you look at Matt Ryan, it's like, okay, he played a pretty good game. No, this dude is so washed beyond belief. I have no confidence in this team moving forward, so I don't think they should be laying 3.5 points here. Prop standpoint, I will be going to Michael Pittman. I stayed away last week. It was his first game back from nursing a quad injury, so I was a little weary of that. But in a game where the offense wasn't great, he saw 9 targets, 8 receptions, 72 yards, hitting his over, which I believe closed around 64.5. So I wouldn't expect it to jump too much up after hitting it by only 8 yards. So if we get somewhere in the 60s, I like it there. He's the clear number 1 option against a not so great secondary here. Anything for you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Pittman. You saw what happened when they took him away in week 2, and Matt Ryan was lost out there. He had no idea who to throw it to. You probably couldn't name the rest of their receiving core. So I think he's really the only look on the board here. Hopefully we're getting a good number on it still. I'm in on Michael Pittman. That's the only look I have.
All right, chugging right along here. The 2-1, yes, that is correct. I believe 2-1 Chicago Bears headed east to take on the 2-1 New York Giants. Who would have thought we'd be in week 3 with this matchup between both teams being 2-1? Giants obviously coming off that Monday night loss to the Dallas Cowboys. This game's about as ugly as it gets. Giants are laying 3.5 points at home here, 39.5 point over under. What do you like here, Dave?
This is similar to this Cowboys game. I still think this Giants stink and I want to fade them. I hate that they're playing the Bears, but I think I have to swallow it and take the Bears at +3.5 here, if that's the number you can get on. I just I don't believe in this Giants team. That, maybe they were fun to watch week one. You see Brian Dable celebrating with the guys. Saquon Barkley is clearly back to his rookie year form. Love it when he's out there doing what he can do best. But I just think Daniel Jones stinks. And if you look at his splits, home versus away, at home, 18 to 20 touchdown to interception ratio, on the road, 30 and 11 touchdown to interception ratio. Clearly worse at home. So give me the Bears plus the points in this game. Again, it's not one of my favorite looks on the board, but I think I have to take it in this one.
Yeah, it's Bears or pass, definitely. I think I'm going to pass the spread. This is kind of like the Bears Texans game for me last week, where I actually passed on that one as well. It's just going to be another ugly game. This Bears team is an absolute disaster. The Giants, like the fact that both of these teams are 2-1. I still can't believe, because they still look like bottom 10 teams in the league. And I think it's going to start, like, I had high hopes for the Giants coming into this season, but yeah, Daniel Jones, just the dude isn't it. Hopefully they can turn it over to my guy Tyrod Taylor at some point and turn the season around. But yeah, no play on spread or total for me. From a prop standpoint, David Montgomery looks like he's trending towards not playing in this game. So Khalil Herbert filling in last week, 20 carries, 157 yards. The Bears have no interest in passing the ball. This is a running offense. They don't want to put Justin Fields in danger. They don't want him to throw the ball and develop for the future for whatever reason. So if they're just going to ride Khalil Herbert and give him 20 plus carries, I'll be looking at his rush yards. Hopefully we get that somewhere in the 60s or probably in the 70s after a monster game last week. I'll be looking at the over there. And then the Bears, anything, literally anything related to this passing offense, just give me the under. Give me Justin Fields at 100.5 passing yards, and I'll take the under at this point, because it's just absolutely disgusting. Darnell Mooney unders, Cole Kmet unders, Equanimous St. Brown unders, whatever I can get on this Bears passing game, is you can't put them low enough.
Well, I do have a number for you. How about Justin Fields under 147.5 passing yards?
Is that what it is? It's opened up?
That's what it is. So he is averaging on the season a whopping 99 passing yards per game on 15 attempts. Just dreadful numbers. Last week he was lying. I think it was 183.5 is what we said earlier. If they drop that by 40 yards, which is a massive adjustment for a quarterback, we're taking that under all day. So I love that play. Also the Khalil Herbert play as well. His yards. I want to look at his rushing attempts as well. Last year in 4 games that he played, 2 that he started, he had 19 and 18 carries. And then the other 2 games that he played in, he finished with 18 and 23. And then, as you said, last week when Montgomery went down, he had 20 carries for 157 yards. So I think he's another one of those guys like Alexander Mattison. If you put Khalil Herbert in there, I don't think the running game takes any steps backwards. They're going to continue to feed him as if it is David Montgomery. So I'm going to look at his yards and attempts in addition to that Justin Fields under. I can't believe, I don't know how much lower they can make that number.
The closest he's come to that, the most passing yards he's had this year is 121. So still 20 plus yards below where he's lined at this week. It's like, it's worse than 2 years ago when we were taking Cam Newton unders every game. It's just unbelievable. Is Fields the only one with a prop posted in that game right now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I will definitely be on the Justin Fields under there with you. And they're probably going to wait for David Montgomery to get officially ruled out before posting Khalil Herbert props. All right. Let's go from one disgustingly ugly game to the next. The New York Jets heading to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, who are 3 to 3.5 point favorites, 41.5 point over under. New York Jets saying Zach Wilson is going to take back the reins at starting quarterback. Minkah Fitzpatrick sounds like he's going to be good to go after suffering a concussion. TJ Watt still out. Dave, tell me why you love the New York Jets in this matchup.
I do wish that Joe Flacco was the starter in this game. I would love it more, but I still have to take the Jets, even with Zach Wilson coming back. And for me, this is, I talked about at the top of the show. The Steelers offense is horrible. I think Mitch Trubisky, if he loses this game or looks horrible in this game, as I think he will, this might be his last NFL start before they bring in Kenny Pickett. They might have no choice if they lose to the New York Jets and Zach Wilson in his first game back. The tricky thing with this game is Zach Wilson is such an unknown quantity still. He might be a really bad quarterback, and we could see him come out there, pull a Nathan Peterman and throw 5 picks in the first half and never to be seen again. Or he could be a serviceable quarterback. He's got a lot of new weapons on that offense. Garrett Wilson's looked great. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Brees Hall. There are a little bit of weapons around him that he can work with. So, and Flacco is extremely immobile in the pocket. We have some mobility now with Zach Wilson. So for me, I took the Jets at plus 3.5, but since this is such a boomer bust spot, I'm riding with the Jets money line as well.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't lay it with the Steelers. Kind of like you said, I'm a little scared with Zach Wilson, even from a mobility standpoint. He's obviously coming off a knee injury, so I don't know how mobile he's going to be.
He can't be less mobile than Joe Flacco.
That's true. All right, so. that's very fair. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to take the Jets here, so I think I'm gonna pass with it. I've been like I'm just debating my head because I've been going back and forth all week if I want to take it. I think I'm going to end up passing, but I do have a prop, and I'm going to be looking at Mitch Trubisky under passing yards. Pretty much, if we get anything in the 200s, the season high is 207 yards. He's averaging 189 per game. He just doesn't have it. He's like you kind of said, he's not the answer. There's no downfield passing game, and like we touched on, there's a real chance. Mike Tomlin may not want to admit it, but if he comes out and looks terrible, we could easily see Kenny Pickett get a run. I think this would be the perfect matchup for him to do it, throw him out there at halftime against the New York Jets, and build some confidence against a weaker team. So Mitch Trubisky, anything in the 200s, I'll be looking to take the under.
We do have a Mitch Trubisky line, 215.5.
Oh, baby. I like this week already.
I like that call. If Mitch is even struggling mid-game, could you see the switch to Kenny Pickett? I mean, what else do you need to see after these first 3 weeks, the stats I gave in the beginning, and then doing this against the New York Jets? I don't know what else you can't defend the guy after that point. So I'm curious to see what happens in that game.
He could get booed off the field in the home stadium. He could booed off the field in the home stadium, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can only throw him out there for so long if there's just no improvement from this offense. All right. We got through probably the ugliest 2 games of the slate. Now let's get on to one of the more exciting games on the slate. The Buffalo Bills heading to Baltimore as 3-point favorites. Total is at 51.5. The Bills are pretty decimated by injuries right now, coming off that loss to Miami. Ravens coming off a win in New England. Bills are down, like I said, almost their entire secondary. Their center, Dawson Knox, is banged up, down some defensive linemen. It's basically looks like the Ravens injury report from last year. The Ravens sound like they're going to get Ronnie Stanley back, which is obviously big. Really, so I bet the over. I bet the over 51.5. They actually dipped down. I know there's a little bit of concerns with some weather related to the hurricane over the weekend, but really all I need is Josh Allen and the Ravens secondary to feel comfortable with this over hitting. The last 2 weeks, the Ravens allowed Mac Jones to throw for 320 yards and average 10 yards per pass. 10 yards per pass to Mac Jones in that receiving core, and also allowed Tua to throw for 469 yards and average 9.4 yards per pass. So I don't know what it is. Like I'm going back and forth. Like why is this Ravens secondary so bad? They came into the season finally healthy. They have 2 great corners. They have a good safety. Like I don't get why they're so bad, but they are. And I have no reason to believe that against the Bills and Josh Allen and Steph Diggs and Gabe Davis that they're going to magically turn it around and shut them down. So, and we've seen the Ravens the last couple of weeks light up the scoreboard as well. And with all the pieces, the Bills are down on their defense. I think the Ravens are going to be able to put up points here. So if this is if there's no weather factor, like really bad winds or anything like that, I feel really good about this over hitting. And the Bills, they never get off the field. Like every third down, I swear to God, they get every third down conversion. And when they don't get on third down, they get it on fourth down. And it just wears down a defense. They're the number 1 team on third down conversion percentage, number 4 on fourth down percentage. So like we saw it last week, they ran 90 plays. They controlled the game. They didn't win, But we saw what happens against the Dolphins when this Ravens defense gets worn down. The Dolphins explode for 28 points in the fourth quarter. So I'm taking the over 51.5. I did not play anything on the side here. What do you have?
I'm with you on the over in this game for all the reasons that were already touched on. But as far as the side, this is a Ravens game to me. I took the Ravens at plus 3.5. The way I'm looking at it, two high-powered offenses. I do think there's obviously some concern with the Ravens secondary. It's just absolutely baffling why they can't seem to contain anybody. We saw Gabe Davis was still not 100% last week. Diggs left the game a couple times with cramps. I'm sure those guys are going to be fine. I don't think there's going to be any sort of shutdown of this Bills offense. I just think the way that these two teams are trending, Ravens are getting a little bit healthier. Bills are going the complete opposite direction. Every day they're losing a new guy on offense or defense. This team seems to be in a little bit of a rut right now. The other thing about this, though, Lamar Jackson is just playing at an absolutely absurd level right now. He's accounting for 86% of the offensive yardage for that Ravens team, and he has accounted for all 12 of their offensive touchdowns through 3 games. Just absolutely insane what he's been doing out there. So I have no doubt that he's going to be able to put up the points to keep pace with the Bills, and that's kind of where the play comes in. The Bills historically have been a either win by 3 touchdowns team, or they're going to struggle in those close games. So I look back at 2021, the Bills' average margin of victory for their 11 wins in 2021 was 22 points. We saw them do the same thing again week 1. They dominated the Rams. They dominated week 2. I forget who they played. But in their close games last year, the games that they lost to the Steelers by 6, the Jaguars by 3, they had a bad loss to the Colts, but the Titans by 3, the Bucks by 6, the Chiefs in the playoffs by 6, and then they just lost to the Dolphins by 2. For whatever reason, this offense is incredible. Josh Allen is incredible. When they get into these close games, something happens where they just can't seem to click it together. Everyone thought when they were driving down the field last week, they had 4 plays within the Dolphins' 10-yard line. They could not punch it into the end zone. I don't know why in these close games they can't seem to put it all together. And I think the Ravens are going to be able to keep it close. So I am on the Ravens plus 3.5, and I'm going to go with a Ravens money line for that same reason. If the Bills are going to win this game, they're probably going to win by 20 points. And if it's going to be a close game, I like the chances with the Ravens in this one.
All right. And that week 2 win for the Bills that you couldn't remember was over the Titans on the Monday night, 41-7 or whatever it was. Any props here for you?
I have one prop. I'm going to save it for later, though.
All right, I will be going right back to Steph Diggs. We're basically getting the same line as last week at 78.5. I saw it before we got on here. Like we said, he got worn down in that Miami Heat, no pun intended, last week, and finished with 74 yards. But I have no problem going right back to him. I have no reason not to target this Ravens secondary. Like I said, 122 and 148 yards in the first 2 weeks, averaging over 11 targets per week. This Bills team just passes the ball. They don't run the ball. Josh Allen had over 60 attempts last week, so I don't expect anything different here. It's a game I like the over in, so give me the best receiver in this matchup at 78.5. And Lamar Jackson, until this guy's getting lined in probably like the upper 60s, I think you got to keep going back to his rush yards. Like you said, he's accounting for 85% of their total yards. He's rushed for over 100 yards in the last 2 games. And it just seems like he's always going to break that one big run throughout the game where he's just slipping through tacklers. So I think he was lined at 55.5 before I jumped on here. I think that's still a good number to take. All right. Jumping into the 4 p.m. Eastern slate, the LA Chargers coming off an absolute beatdown from the Jacksonville Jaguars, heading to Houston to take on another AFC South team in the Texans after Davis Mills threw a game-clinching interception in a loss to the Bears. Chargers are 5.5-point favorites, 44.5 point over under. Chargers injuries: Rashawn Slater out, Joey Bosa out, Jalen Guyton out, Corey Linsley, J.C. Jackson, Keenan Allen all questionable. Herbert obviously nursing that rib injury. Houston, Dameon Pierce limited in practice today, but doesn't seem to be anything serious. Is this a buy low spot on the Chargers, or is it a stay away until they get healthy?
I think this is the buy low spot. This is the point you want to get it at. We saw this line move from 6.5 down to 5.5. There were some fives out there. I would love to get a little bit lower. I don't know how low this number is going to go. If we can get a 4.5, I would be all over it. If it sticks at 5.5, might make me question it a little bit more. I'd love to see a lot of those questionable guys trending into the right direction, but I just think this team is far and away better than the Texans, even at half strength. They ran into a hot Jaguars team last week, and they didn't look like themselves. If you can get Keenan Allen back, you have that security blanket. You have your number one target out there. Justin Herbert gets another week to sort of rehab. Maybe you can get Austin Eckler going in the run game. The Texans have been very susceptible to the run this year. So I think it sets up well for a Chargers team that we know is much better than they played last week. It's a good spot to get back on track for them.
Yeah, I've been bouncing back and forth, so it's definitely a Chargers or pass for me. I'm going to wait and see where the line ends up. It's definitely a nice discount. This opened at 7 or 7.5, and now we're getting below 6, which I think is a great spot. It's concerning a little bit because I think the biggest weakness of this Texans team is their run defense, and we've just the Chargers. I mean, my God, they have the worst running game in the league right now. Not that the Texans are great against the pass, but they have a solid corner, and they have a decent pass rush that's been getting some pressure. The Chargers looked awful last week, but we also like at the same time, injuries aside, it's one game in the grand scheme of things. At some point, there's so much variance in an NFL season. Yeah, they look terrible. It was a weird week leading up to the game. There was just so much uncertainty with Herbert's status. I think if you get Keenan Allen back this week, that's a huge plus, giving him his safety blanket back. So yeah, I would definitely lean the Chargers. I'll probably end up on them just because you're really getting a generous line here. But I definitely want to see, especially on the offensive line, where some of like Rashawn Slater's obviously out big injury, but if we can get Corey Linsley and J.C. Jackson on the outside to match up with Brandon Cooks, and then Keenan Allen, I definitely want back. It sounds like Keenan Allen's going to play, which is huge. But another week recovered for Herbert. It was more like the whole team looked bad this week. I mean, Herbert didn't look great. But it's not like he was like crippled throwing the ball because of the injury. I mean, he still threw for almost 300 yards in the game, and so I don't expect it. It's definitely gonna. I assume it's gonna impact him a little, but not to the point where I think he's gonna look bad. So it's definitely a Chargers or pass line for me here. Do you have any props in this game?
Yeah, one prop. I don't see a line for it yet, but I'm going to be targeting a bit scary of a play at Austin Eckler rushing yards or over rushing yards or over rushing plus receiving, depending where those are lined at. So we said that the Texans have been very susceptible to the run this year. They gave up 161 yards to Jonathan Taylor, 122 to the combination of Javonte and Melvin Gordon, and then 157 last week to Khalil Herbert. And more than that, so we saw Eckler start off the year getting 14 carries in weeks 1 and 2. He only turned that into 36 and 39 yards. And then last week, it was just an off game for the entire team. Like you said, he finished with 4 carries for 5 yards. So he's averaging 2.5 yards per carry on the season, which is not great. We know Austin Eckler is more capable than that. But then you have Brandon Staley after the game coming out and saying, we're trying to get Austin as many touches as we can. We did not get enough runs off. The plan is definitely for him to touch the ball. So for me, I know, coach speak is kind of a thing that we make fun of all the time, but a lot of times in these spots, that the guy is capable of breaking off big runs. You saw what he did last year, was a touchdown machine, was all over the field, catching passes and running the ball. When your coach tells you that we want to get you the ball more and you had 14 carries in weeks 1 and 2, I'm expecting similar volume against a bad Texans defense. I would love to maybe we get a discount on Austin Eckler rushing yards and rushing plus receiving yards.
Yeah, we'll see if we do end up getting that nice discount line. I think if you're betting Eckler over yards, I think you got to take the Chargers spread, because if they're going to be able to run the ball here, I think they win this game pretty comfortably, honestly. So it's almost one and the same for me. If I'm on the Chargers, I'll definitely be with you on Eckler rush yards. All right, moving on in the 4 p.m. slate. This game is going to be our debate of the week. And when I win this, I will officially be counting this against Jeff's record because you guys are blood related. So I'm going to count that against Jeff. The Arizona Cardinals heading to Carolina to take on the Panthers. Panthers are 1.5-point favorites, 42.5-point over under. Panthers coming off what was a pretty ugly win versus the New Orleans Saints, and the Cardinals coming off a loss against the Rams, in which they somewhat hung around for most of the game. But that was more due to the Rams not really capitalizing on their opportunities. The Rams could have won that game by 30 points, honestly, if they were able to punch it in the red zone a few times. So, Dave, I will give you the floor to make your case for one of the worst teams in the league, the Arizona Cardinals.
When you said one of the worst teams, that could have easily been for the Panthers as well, for the record. This is an ugly game with two teams that are incredibly untrustworthy. For me, this is kind of a play on the Baker versus Kyler matchup. I think Kyler Murray is a far and away better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, who is completing a league low 51.9% of his passes, which is only slightly ahead of Justin Fields. I mean, they've been able to do nothing on the receiving end of the ball, and we know that's where the Cardinals are very susceptible. Their secondary has been just absolutely terrible. I don't think Baker Mayfield has enough stuff that he can expose that. So if you're giving me the situation, if they can kind of contain Christian McCaffrey like we saw in the first two games of the year, McCaffrey wasn't really able to get going. I don't trust Baker Mayfield to bring this one home. I think Kyler Murray, if you can get him to use his legs a little bit more. James Conner has not been great, averaging only 3 yards a carry versus what we saw him pretty great performance last year. The other piece of this, the Cardinals, for whatever reason, have been very good on the road the last couple of years. Last year, they were 8-1 against the spread on the road. They started off 1-0 this year. So you're going to give me the Cardinals plus the points in this game. What is it, 1.5 right now?
Yeah.
I'm not laying this with Baker Mayfield. I've been burned by him a couple times already this year, and I think Matt Rule is maybe one of the worst coaches in the league.
I mean, you're not really laying anything. It's 1.5 points, but let me tell you something
Take the points.
Let me tell you something about this Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense. 4th fewest yards per play in the NFL. Kyler isn't really using his legs. 2 rushes for 8 yards last week. He didn't run for. He was in the 20s the last the two prior 2 weeks. You bottle him up running the ball. I mean, that's half their offense right there. Okay. So their defense even worse. Listen to this. Like, I couldn't believe they are blitzing at the highest rate in the entire NFL. Do you want to guess how many sacks they've registered in the first 3 weeks of the season?
I'm going to say 3.
2 sacks. They're blitzing at the highest rate, and they've registered 2 sacks. So now we're trusting one of the worst secondaries in the league to basically one-on-one cover. And I know Baker's not a great cornerback, but this offense has enough weapons to where if you're isolating McCaffrey on a linebacker, you're blitzing everyone else. You're isolating DJ Moore on a corner. I mean, this Cardinals team, like, oh my God, fewest yards per pass in the league. Like I said, 4th fewest yards per play. There's just nothing on this team right now. And the one thing I can say about the Panthers in this matchup, they have the best unit on the field with their defense. Their defense has been fine. So say what you want about Baker and the offense. The Cardinals are piss poor, bottom 5 on both ends of the ball here. So I'm getting the best unit on the field here. That's what's basically a pick 'em. So I'm taking the Panthers all the way here. I'm just going to keep fading this Cardinals team. I really cannot stand this Kyler and this team. So how far can Kyler? Like, there's only so much Kyler can do, especially if you take away his legs. We obviously saw them on those 2-point conversion stuff against the Raiders. He made some great video game plays there, but my God, like, and you need DeAndre Hopkins in this offense. AJ Green sounds like he's going to miss. JJ Watt's questionable. James Conner's questionable. Rondale Moore's still questionable. So this team is just a disaster. It's only a matter of time before Cliff Kingsbury's on his way out. So give me the Panthers here all the way.
It's great that the Panthers have all these weapons, but Baker Mayfield doesn't even use them. How many catches on the season does DJ Moore have? He's had 1,000 yards for 5 years in a row. Baker doesn't even look his way. So I don't think the weapons are there. I don't think Baker knows how to use them properly. So to me, this is a Cardinal spot. Cliff Kingsbury could very well be on his way out if they start this season 1-5, 1-6. This is a game that they need to bring home and show that they are not just completely giving up on the season. Because if they lose to the Panthers in this spot, they all might just give up except for Kyler Murray, and it's going to be him running around 100 yards back and forth before throwing it up or running into the end zone on every single play, and it's going to get ugly fast. So I think this is a must-win game for the Cardinals if they want to salvage any last bit of their season. I don't think either one of us think the Cardinals are going to make a run at the playoffs, the division, anything like that. But in this spot, I like them much more than that Panthers team that I'm just not a believer in whatsoever.
You make the same case for the Panthers. Matt Rule could easily be on his way out just as quick as Cliff Kingsbury.
But they had no expectations. The
that's
Panthers.
Not true. They had expectations. They brought in Baker. They traded for Billy. There was expectations surrounding this team, and they brought in Baker. I don't think you can say there was no expectations.
Not nearly as high as what the Cardinals have been up against.
I mean, disagree. I think everyone knew the Cardinals weren't going to be good this year. I think there was higher expectations with the Panthers.
I wouldn't agree. Inside that organization, I think the Cardinals, whether or not we believe it is true, I think the Cardinals believe they are a much better team than the Panthers.
Every team believes that, though. I don't know. Whatever. All right. Any props in this game for you?
Absolutely not.
All right. I will be looking at Christian McCaffrey rush yards. He's still not involved in the passing game, really, for whatever reason, but he saw 25 carries last week in their first win of the season. So in another game, I think they can win. I think he's going to see a similar workload. Yeah, I think 20 carries the week before he rushed for over 100 yards in both games. So if we get anything in the mid to upper 70s, I'd be fine taking the over there. Cam Akers, like I said, just rushed for 60 yards against this Cardinals defense. So I'd have to check the formula on this, but I believe one Cam Akers yard equates to about 4 Christian McCaffrey yards. So we're looking at a minimum of 240 Christian McCaffrey rush yards in this game. So yeah, give me Christian McCaffrey rush yards wherever they open up. All right, moving on to the Mac Jones list. New England Patriots headed to Lambeau Field as 10-point underdogs. Over under is 40.5. Packers held on to a late lead against the Tampa Bay Bucks to get to 2-1. The Patriots suffered a loss at the hands of the Ravens. Mac Jones, like I said, is out. Jacoby Myers is questionable. Jalen Mills is questionable with a hamstring injury. Elton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari, maintenance days today. I assume they didn't practice today, but I assume it's just maintenance on those injuries. Jair Alexander also questionable with a groin injury. I took the Patriots here at +10. It doesn't feel great backing Brian Hoyer here, but I just look at this line, even without Mac Jones, it just feels like too many points. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. The Packers defense held up against Fournette last week, but it was only 12 carries. It was really a product of the entire Tampa Bay offense not being able to stay on the field. Week 2, we saw David Montgomery run all over this defense for 122 yards, and that offense had absolutely no threat of a passing game, as we know. And the Vikings also ran for 120-plus yards combined between Dalvin and Alexander Madison. So I think the Patriots can have some success here on the ground. And offensively, the Packers, they kind of are what I thought they would be. They just want to slow the game down. They aren't really going to light up the scoreboard. They're averaging just 17 points through 3 weeks. We have 2 of the slowest paced teams in the league here. The Packers are 31st in neutral game pace. The Patriots are 19th, and they're probably going to even look to slow it down even more here with no Mac Jones, which is a huge benefit with a double-digit spread here. So the Patriots defense, I don't think it's great. I think they're average, and they can do enough here. And I think if the Patriots get 14 points in this game, they'll be able to cover the spread, because I don't see Green Bay really lighting it up, scoring 27 or 30-plus points in this game. So I'm going to roll the dice with what we expect to be Brian Hoyer and the Patriots catching 10 here in Lambeau. Dave, what do you got?
I hear the arguments for the Patriots, and I think the interesting thing is, we expect Brian Hoyer. This game got up to 10.5. Do we think that Brian Hoyer and this Patriots team is equal to Justin Fields and this Bears team? Because that's what that line closed at in week 2. They were plus 10.5 in that game, and they got absolutely smoked.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a similar situation where the Packers are just going to beat up on this far inferior team. I agree that their offense has changed. You're not seeing Aaron Rodgers throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. They're doing it in different ways. I think he's slowly building more trust with these receivers. I mean, when you lose a piece like Devontae Adams, there's going to have to be an offensive adjustment. I think that's a natural thing that's going to happen. So you're seeing him get Allen Lazard involved. Romeo Dobbs is starting to get into the fold. Robert Tunyon's back from his injury. And it feels like outside of the one game, they've barely used Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. They both had pretty average production throughout the year. They haven't been used to their full potential. I think this is a spot that the Packers are just going to beat up on a far inferior team, just in case there's any sort of backdoor potential, or they're not putting up those high, or if they put up a lot of points early and then kind of take their foot off the gas, which is, I can see that happening in this game. I took the Packers first half at -6.
All right. I mean, I get it, but I just think like all right, we're seeing these guys get involved in the Packers offenses resulted in 14 points last week. I know it's against the Bucks, but you compare it to the Bears matchup. This Patriots team much better. They're much better than the Bears. And you got to like I don't love this Patriots team, but their defense is much better than what the Bears are throwing out there. And I think you got to give Bill Belichick a little bit of credit. So yeah, I think this Patriots team still, even with Brian Hoyer, they're a tougher opponent than what the Packers saw in the Bears. And the Packers just have historically, like we know, Aaron Rodgers just absolutely dominated that Bears team. So I think this is a much different matchup than that. So yeah, I'll take the Pats plus 10. I don't hate the like. I don't think there's really backdoor potential with the Patriots. Like, you said you took them first half. I get it, but I'm not really like if I'm down. If the Patriots are down like 17 points late, I'm not going to be hanging on the edge of my seat hoping Brian Hoyer leads a drive to backdoor cover the spread for me. So I just think this is a game where the Patriots are going to be able to hang around throughout. And like I said, it's going to be a slower pace game where both teams want to control the clock, which plays into my favor here. From a props standpoint, I will be targeting the Patriots running game. Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are basically at a 50-50 split right now. I think it's honestly like a dead even 50-50 split. So I'll see where their yards open up if we're getting them in the 40s or 50s. I might take a stab on both of them on the over. Maybe you get one of them hitting and it kind of cancels out the other one, or you have a chance at both of them hitting the over. So I'll be looking there. Outside of that, I don't have anything else. Do you have any props here?
Now, the only thing I would look at is Romeo Dobbs coming off an 873 and one touchdown game off of 8 targets. If he's starting to develop that trust, that's kind of the way Aaron Rodgers is. You really have to earn his trust out there in the receiving core, and then he can really keep you into the fold in that offense. So I don't know if we've seen enough out of him to really warrant that, but I'd be curious to see what his line's at this week. Nothing other than that.
All right, moving on to the AFC West. The Broncos are coming off a bye week. Oh, no, wait, sorry. They did play last week. Could have fooled me, but the Broncos coming off that Sunday night 11-10 victory over the San Francisco. That was a score, right? 11-10, yeah. San Francisco 49ers. The Raiders coming off a loss to the Titans where they failed to convert a 2-point conversion to send the game to overtime. Raiders are 2.5-point favorites. Over under is 45.5 here. Both of these teams off to a extremely disappointing start. I think both of these teams had pretty high expectations coming in. At least the Broncos, obviously huge expectations getting Russell Wilson. The Raiders were projected to be the worst team in this division, but I think them bringing in Devontae Adams, especially within the organization, they had high expectations. It's a little weird here, the Raiders laying 2.5 points. I get it. I tease the Broncos here. I think this is a pretty good teaser. Like I definitely think the Broncos can win this. If the Raiders end up laying 3 here at any point, I will be all over the Broncos. We have Hunter Renfrow questionable with a concussion for the Raiders, and we also have starting corner Rocky Yassin questionable with a knee strain who's trending in the wrong direction. This Broncos, I mean, holy crap, this Broncos offensive line is bad. Russell Wilson's broken. Nathaniel Hackett can't coach. Overall disappointment through 3 weeks. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but there just really hasn't been anything encouraging. And the Raiders, you can kind of say the same thing. There's already rumors of Josh McDaniels having a meeting behind closed doors with Mark Davis after just 3 weeks. The offense and Derek Carr just aren't clicking. They just allowed Ryan Tannehill to throw for 9.8 yards per pass with that piss poor receiving core and passing game. And the Raiders, they were one of those teams we kind of talked about in the offseason that they had a ton of luck in these one-score games, and it seems like the regression's just kind of hitting them hard to start the year here. So I actually do kind of lean the Broncos to win here because I think if there's ever a spot that they're going to click, it's against this Raiders defense and this secondary. Um, I'm not there yet doing it. I feel very comfortable with the teaser, but if we don't end up getting the 3, I'll probably just end up going Broncos money line at plus money. What do you have here?
Yeah, I also have the Broncos in a tease, which I'll touch on more later. I mean, this is just such an ugly matchup. Both of these teams have severely underperformed expectation. I was a little bit higher on the Broncos than some people were versus the Raiders coming into this year. We know there was a lot of love for that AFC West division, but both teams, I mean, you said it, McDaniels is very close to getting fired. Nathaniel Hackett, he could be fired any day now. I mean, he's not actually in danger of it, but he deserves to be just the way he's coached these first couple games. It's been really ugly out there. I mean, the Raiders' leading receiver is Mac Hollins. Like, I don't know what this offense is doing. They're not getting Devontae Adams involved. They did in week 1. They just really haven't been targeting him since that. I don't know why they're not utilizing what we thought they brought him in there for. I've just historically been down on the Derek Carr-led Raiders team. So I wouldn't lay the points with them. I would take the Broncos on the money line if I'm going to bet the side on it. But I think the Broncos teaser is the best leg on the board.
Yeah, and I think this is another matchup where if you have confidence in any unit in this game, it's the Broncos defense. They've at least been good. They got off to a little bit of a rough start against Seattle, but then they clamped down in the second half, only allowed 9 points to the Texans, and then allowed 10 points to what's a pretty good San Francisco team. So I think if you're going to take a side in this matchup, you take the underdog who's throwing out the best unit on the field. So both these offenses have had their struggles. So you can, if you want to call them even, fine. The Raiders defense in the secondary is brutal. The Broncos have a pretty strong overall defense. They got a strong pass rush. So I feel good about taking the Broncos from that standpoint. From a prop standpoint, I am going to go right back to Cortland Sutton. They definitely jacked it up this week. It's been in the 50s. It opened at 66.5. I already bet it. Even with how bad this offense has been and how bad Russell Wilson's looked, he's been smashing this every week. He's gotten double-digit targets the past 2 weeks. He has 72, 122, and 97 yards through 3 weeks. So I'm fine playing this at 66.5 versus a very weak secondary who now could also be missing Rocky Yassin, one of their starting corners. Anything for you here?
Yeah, I mean, you have to go back to Sutton every time on this one. Even with Judy coming back more healthy than he was last week, you've seen it throughout the first 3 weeks of the year. This is the target that Russell Wilson is going to. There's not a lot of production on this offense, but there's been enough to support Cortland Sutton overs for the past 3 weeks, and I don't see any reason that's not going to continue against the poor Raiders secondary. So that's the only look I have.
All right. Sunday night football. This should be a fun one. The Kansas City Chiefs as 1.5 point favorites. We think traveling to Tampa Bay. We're not sure yet. This game could get moved to Minneapolis. I saw today is where the location would be if there are any, I guess you could say, side effects from the hurricane over the weekend. The Chiefs are coming off that loss to the Colts, as we said, and the Bucks failed to convert the 2-point conversion at the buzzer against the Packers to send that game to overtime. So both teams falling to 2-1 here. Little bit of an interesting matchup here, Dave. What do you have in this one?
Yeah, very interesting matchup, especially from the standpoint of what these teams are coming off of. So the Chiefs, we saw them blow that game against the Colts. There's no reason they shouldn't have brought that one home. The Bucks have just been up and down the entire season. I mean, we had the Tom Brady offseason stuff, losing offensive linemen left and right. Godwin goes down. Julio, of course, goes down. Mike Evans gets suspended. He has no one to lean on. He's yelling his face off for the past 2 weeks, just begging for some help out there. So it's not been a great start for either of these teams, I think, like we expected. Yet the Bucks are sitting here at 2-1, and I like them in this spot. I would like it more in this game if they actually went and played in Minneapolis and we can get a bit of a discount on the number. I would take them again if it was down to a pick. I just think the Bucks getting these pieces back. We know Mike Evans.
You're taking the Bucks?
I'm taking the Bucks.
Okay, wait. All right, so you have the reverse lineman, and you did take them at a pick 'em, but the Chiefs are -1.5 right now.
Oh yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
you're
you
right.
did.
If that moves another point in the Bucks direction, I'm gonna like it even more. But I'm
Yeah.
playing the Bucks in this game. Getting Evans back. I think they're gonna get Julio back. I think
Who knows? I
Godwin.
don't even try to speculate
Yeah.
on what receivers are going to play for the team.
I think Julio's going to play and Godwin's still going to be out. I really think Tom Brady just needs anyone out there. Hopefully he can lean on Leonard Fournette a little bit. He looked awful last week, but he's been getting the volume out there. Brady loves those dump off passes to him, and the Chiefs just don't seem fully right. Their entire offense is Travis Kelce. You can't trust any of those receivers out there. So they might be in a bit of a rut going against a tough Bucks defense. So give me the Bucks in this game.
Uh, yeah. I teased the Bucks. They were at 2.5, and that's the team I actually teased with the Broncos. I really like that teaser because they're both teams I feel could win the games. The Chiefs lost, like we said, it was kind of just a weird game. I'm kind of writing that one off. I'm not taking too much from it. The Chiefs weren't going to go 17-0. They laid a clunker. They made some stupid decisions. It is what it is. Sitting here in week 3, I don't think anyone expected we would be saying the Bucks have 3 offensive touchdowns at this point, but it's really just been mix and match in the receiving core. Like you said, getting Evans back, obviously huge. I This Chiefs defense is definitely improved, but I don't think it's a defense that's going to shut down the Bucks like we've seen. Like if there's a game where this team's finally going to score 2 offensive touchdowns in, I think this is a good spot for it. And for as bad as the offense has been, this defense to me, they're probably the best defense in the league right now, allowing just 9 points per game, under 300 total yards. So I really think like seeing a Chiefs game that's at a 45.5 point total or whatever it's at now, it might be a point lower. That's from earlier today. I think that's a testament to what this Bucks defense is. So for as good as the Chiefs offense is, the Bucks have the best defense in the league, and I like to stay within 8 points here. It's not often you're getting Tom Brady as an underdog in teaser range, so I'm going to take advantage of it with Brady and what I think is the best defense in the league here. So give me the Bucks in a teaser. I lean the Bucks on the side, but it's again, it's kind of another one of those toss up type games to me. So I'll just stick with the teaser in this one. Any props for you?
I don't see a line for it yet. I think I'm going to go back to Leonard Fournette. I think a lot of people were on him last week, thinking that's really the only weapon Brady had and that Bucks offense had at their disposal, but they just couldn't get anything moving on the ground. He finished with 12 for 35 yards. The 2 weeks prior, he had 21 and 24 carries. So, the volume's going to be there. If they can just get the offense moving a little bit, I like them sticking with Leonard Fournette. I don't think he's in any danger of losing touches to anyone else in that running back room. So I want to see what his numbers are looking at, but I'd like Leonard Fournette overs this week.
Yeah, I think I like that. You can run on this Chiefs defense, and I think you might get a decent line after he didn't do much last week. So I think I can get on board with Leonard Fournette in the running game. All right, final game here, a Monday Night Football NFC West divisional matchup between 2 teams I'd say are still trying to get their footing underneath them in the 2022 season. Rams are 2-1, but really haven't looked that impressive in either of their wins. Jimmy G coming off a brutal game in which the offense went 1 for 10 on third down. He's running out of the back of the end zone, getting a safety and throwing a pick 6 on the same play. Trent Williams now lost for the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously a big loss, starting left tackle, and linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair also going to miss this game for San Francisco. This is a tough one for me. I could see teasing the Rams here. I just don't feel confident in either of these teams right now from what I've seen. We know Shanahan has definitely had the upper hand on McVay in these matchups. What do you got here, Dave?
Yeah, Shanahan does have the record on this, but just last year in the playoffs, the Rams took them down on the way to their Super Bowl win. So I think we're over that hump. I'm not concerned about the coaching matchup. I think they're both 2 of the brightest minds in the game right now. So for me, this is a Rams teaser spot. I think the Trent Williams loss is a huge for that 49ers offense. We all know about the Rams pass rush already. If they're not able to get that running game going, we didn't see as much out of Deebo Samuel as I was thinking we would have seen last week in that Broncos game. I mean, that was just an absolute stinker overall. And we saw what the Broncos defense was able to do to Jimmy G and make him uncomfortable out there. Doesn't seem like he's fully back to form yet. He got George Kittle involved a little bit, Deebo Samuel, but I don't think there was enough of. We know it's not a high-powered offense, but I just think the Rams are going to be able to exploit some things on the defensive side of the ball. And if they can keep moving the ball with Cooper Kupp, he had a down week last week, but there's no reason he shouldn't be going for another 100 yards in this game. I like the Rams in the divisional matchup in a teaser, and I think I'm going to take them on the money line as well. See at plus 100 right now.
Yeah, see, I'm a little concerned about the Rams only because we saw in week one this offensive line was a massive concern against the Bills. Like Stafford was under pressure on his
I
back the whole
can't
time.
think you can
So
take anything in that game.
no,
The
no,
Bills
no.
just absolutely dominated that game in every facet of it. I don't think that's something I want to take into consideration against this Niners team.
Yeah, but
Totally
I think
different beast.
I think you have to because you had that brutal showing from the offensive line, and then now it's like it's getting swept under the rug a little bit because the Rams then go play the Falcons and they go play the Cardinals, who have the worst pass rush in the entire NFL, pretty much. So now we're going against another top tier defensive front here for the first time since that beatdown from the Bills. So I think that's my concern here is that since that, they haven't really been tested up front. So that's where I'm pretty hesitant to get on board with the Rams here. But I also haven't seen enough from the 49ers to feel comfortable. So as much as I want to have a play here, I think it's going to have to be a pass for me, and I'll find out a little bit more about both of these teams in this matchup. So I think it'll be a fun game to watch because it is, a great game to take some data away from. But ultimately a pass for me. Props, I will be looking at my good pal, Cam Akers, under rush yards, anything in the 40s. I don't know what else negative I can say about this guy. He averages 3.5 yards per carry for the season, fumbled on the goal line last week. So maybe it sends him back a bit in the doghouse like we saw in week one. The 49ers obviously have a pretty stout run defense. In the two regular seasons last year, the Rams' leading rusher, this was while Akers was out, obviously, but their leading rusher was Darrell Henderson with 31 yards. And then in the second matchup, Sony Michel with 43 yards. In the playoff matchup, Cam Akers rushed for a whopping 48 yards on 13 carries. Henderson has been the much better back, and I expect this to be a competitive game where they're going to be needing to throw the ball a little bit. So Cam Akers, if we get something in the 40s, I will be taking his under. Anything for you here?
No, I do think that the more Cam Akers gets the ball in this game, the less confident I'm going to feel in my Rams bet. I don't want this guy anywhere on the field. So I'm with you on his unders, but no props for me.
All right, that will wrap up the week 4 game by game breakdown. Let's head on to our favorite bets of the week. Dave, what do you got for us?
I'm going to go with what I think are the two best teaser legs on the board. I think right now you'll be getting a Broncos teased up to 8.5, and the Rams are going to be teased up to 7.5. I think both of these teams have the potential to win these games outright. I can't see the Raiders pulling off at what looks to be what would be a double-digit win against this stout Broncos defense, and maybe we can see Russell Wilson finally get somewhat on track. I just refuse to believe that he's this horrible in this offense. It's a new coach, new quarterback. Is this a perfect time for him to open things up a little bit? Throw the ball downfield, for God's sakes. I don't know what else they need to do. I just can't see the Raiders winning by double digits in this. And then likewise, I haven't seen enough from the Niners to trust them. They usually play these closer to the chest, close games all the way to the end. Most of the time, especially in the NFC West division, my philosophy for the last 5 years has basically been to take the underdog in these games, especially if you're getting some points in it. So I love the Rams at over a touchdown on that. So Broncos plus 8.5, Rams will be plus 7.5 in the teaser.
All right, I have been bouncing back and forth like I always do for my favorite bet of the week, but I am going to go with the Cleveland Browns. I guess I will lay the -1.5. I bet them at -120 on the money line, but for the podcast purposes, I will lay the -1.5. Like I said, it's just a game where I think the Browns are going to dominate the line of scrimmage and get to play their type of game and control the game flow. So give me the Browns laying 1.5 in Atlanta. Long shots of the week. Dave, what do you got?
I'm gonna go with Lamar Jackson. Let's see, he's lined at 55.5. So I'm gonna go Lamar Jackson over 60 plus rushing yards and the Ravens money line. We don't have the alt lines out yet, but it should be somewhere around plus 330, plus 340. I just think if one of these things comes true, the other one should come true. If the Ravens are going to win this game, they're going to need Lamar Jackson to play like the MVP that he's been playing at these first 3 weeks. You said it. He said back-to-back games at over 100 yards. Maybe we get a little bit of weather in this game, but either way, we haven't seen enough from J.K. Dobbins to see that he's going to take a lot of that yardage away from Lamar. All it takes is one run for him to hit this total. I'm very confident in that piece of it. And if the Ravens can stick with the Bills throughout this game, keep it close, I think they could pull out the win. So a Lamar Jackson 60 plus rushing yards and a Ravens money line at plus, call it 335.
All right, I'm going to take the same approach that you took in your favorite bet, taking two teams that with a small spread that I think can win the game. Except I'm doing a underdog money line parlay here. I am going to take the Denver Broncos to win outright in Vegas, and I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So you parlay those together right now on FanDuel. We're getting plus 357 odds.
I like it.
And Jeff has told me that he would like his favorite bet of the week to be the Texans money line, so we can mark that up for the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. All right. The chalk donkey parlay. I've been struggling with this one because there's not a ton of favorites that I absolutely love. Even the Chargers that I like in a buy low, but I think at this point is still somewhat of a risky play. I mean, I know you
Eagles
like
are
the
vulnerable still.
Eagles.
They're still vulnerable in this matchup. If the Jaguars come out and win it, it wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world based on the way they're playing. The only confident spot I would have is the Packers in this.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's enough to make a chalk donkey this week. There's a lot of close spreads.
I agree. So I think we're going to hold off on the chalk donkey this week, and we will keep our 1-2 record after the win last week. So last thing before we get out of here, I would like to look ahead to week 5 in what caught my eye here is an Eagles visiting Arizona with a -3.5 point spread in favor of the Eagles. I can see how this is a little bit of a trappy game here. But my God, if the Eagles beat Jacksonville like they're supposed to, and if the Cardinals lose to the Carolina Panthers here, this could open back up at 6.5, honestly, on Sunday night. So I think if you, I think it's a good spot to grab the Eagles. Like I said, this Cardinals team is, to me, a bottom 5 team in the league, one of the worst defenses. Eagles, like we saw them do all last year, dominate bad teams like we've seen them do this year, just pretty much dominate the 3 teams they've played for the most part. So I think that's a pretty good spot to look ahead to next week. Grab the Eagles now, and maybe you'll be sitting pretty on Sunday night with a pretty good line.
Love it.
All right. Anything else from you, Dave?
No, I'm really excited for another week of football. He said those witching hours have been absolutely incredible to watch. Hoping we get what's looking to be like a lot of good games coming down to the wire. So excited just for another week of football. Living the dream over here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get the London game. I know a lot of people, I know there's like
Yes.
mixed feelings on it, but I love the London game. Waking up early in the morning, you don't have to fill the gap between when you wake up and until the 1 o'clock start time. So I'm a huge fan of it. Definitely excited for that. Thanks for being on the show. We will unfortunately have Jeff back on next week. So we think, who knows, maybe we'll have another unexpected bye week. But thank you as always for listening. We really do appreciate it. We hope everyone has an awesome week 4. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at BetRightPod. Please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Write a review if you enjoy the podcast. that is a wrap. Let's see if I can get this right on Jeff's closing from Andrew, Dave, and Jeff. We are the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast because every time you bet with us, you bet right.